step behind the lens, and look beyond the boundaries of ordinary storytelling. Join us as we explore the defining moments in history, capturing the exact seconds that changed our world forever.
Officer, that's the kid stealing all the bikes. Arrest him.
No, I am not. I was just trying to... Shut up, thief. I can clearly see you with 2 bicycles. You think I'm stupid? You're under arrest.
Hold on, it's not what it looks like. I'm helping my...
18-year-old Kendrick Briggs had just moved to an upscale neighborhood where bikes had been getting stolen recently. Was riding his bike to explore the area when he saw a white man in black clothing forcibly steal a bike from a young white boy. Kendrick immediately chased the thief on his own bike, shouting for him to stop, and chased him so aggressively that the thief had to abandon the stolen bike and run on foot through buildings where bikes couldn't follow, leaving Kendrick holding both his own bike and the recovered stolen bike as he tried to find the boy to return it. Melissa Adams, a white woman, looked out her window, saw a black teenager with 2 bikes, immediately assumed he was the thief everyone had been talking about, and called 911 to report him. But what Melissa Adams and Officer Brian Collins didn't know, what they would discover when the actual victim, a crying white boy, came running up and told everyone that Kendrick had just saved his bike and wasn't the thief, was that they had just racially profiled and falsely arrested a teenager who had been trying to help, that the entire incident had been recorded by multiple neighbors, and that Kendrick's mother was an attorney who would file a $1 million lawsuit against Melissa for false reporting and racial profiling that would destroy her reputation and cost her everything. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. And if you believe a black teenager shouldn't be arrested for returning a stolen bike, like this video and subscribe. Willowbrook Estates was the kind of neighborhood where houses had 3-car garages, front lawns looked like they belonged in magazines, and the homeowners association had strict rules about everything from fence heights to mailbox colors. It was quiet, safe, and expensive, and the people who lived there liked it that way. But over the past few weeks, something had been disrupting that sense of security. Bikes had been disappearing from driveways, front yards, and even garages that had been left open. 7 bikes stolen in 3 weeks, and no one had caught the thief. Kendrick Briggs had moved to Willowbrook Estates 2 weeks ago with his mother, Lisa, who was an attorney with a firm downtown specializing in civil rights cases. The house they had bought was smaller than some of the others on the street, but still bigger than anywhere Kendrick had lived before, and he was still getting used to the idea that this quiet, tree-lined neighborhood was now home. He was 18 years old, had just graduated from high school, and was planning to start community college in the fall. In the meantime, he was spending his summer getting to know the area, meeting neighbors, and then riding his bike through the streets to familiarize himself with the layout of the neighborhood. That Saturday afternoon, Kendrick was riding his blue mountain bike through Willowbrook Estates, taking a different route than he had taken the day before. He wore a gray hoodie with the sleeves pushed up to his elbows, black jeans, and white sneakers that were starting to show signs of wear. His headphones were around his neck, not in his ears, because his mother had always told him to stay aware of his surroundings when he was out alone. He pedaled at a relaxed pace, looking at the houses, noting which ones had dogs in the yard, and which ones had kids' toys scattered across the lawn. He was riding past a small park area with a playground and a few benches when he saw something that made him stop pedaling and focus. About 50 feet ahead of him, near the edge of the park, a young white boy who looked to be about 10 or 11 years old was standing next to a red bike. The boy was holding onto the handlebars, and a man in all black clothing, black hoodie, black pants, black shoes, was grabbing the bike and trying to pull it away from him. Kendrick slowed down and watched for a second, trying to figure out if this was a dad being playful or something else. But the boy wasn't laughing. He was pulling back on the bike, his face twisted in distress, and the man wasn't smiling either. He was yanking hard, using his size and strength to overpower the boy. And then the man ripped the bike out of the boy's hands, swung his leg over it, and started pedaling away. The boy stumbled backward, nearly falling, and Kendrick heard him yell, "Hey, that's mine! Stop!" Kendrick didn't think, he just reacted. He stood up on his pedals and started riding as fast as he could toward the man, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Hey, stop! That's not your bike!" The man looked over his shoulder, saw Kendrick coming after him, and pedaled harder. But Kendrick was fast and he was angry. He chased the thief through the park, onto the street and down a block, shouting the entire time for him to stop. The man kept looking back, his face showing panic now as he realized Kendrick wasn't giving up. The chase went on for 2 more blocks, Kendrick closing the distance with every second. The thief tried to make a sharp turn into a narrow alley between 2 buildings, but he miscalculated. The alley was too narrow for him to keep riding at speed, and there were stairs and tight corners ahead that a bike couldn't navigate. The thief realized he was trapped, jumped off the bike while it was still moving, and let it crash to the ground as he took off running on foot through the alley and between the buildings where Kendrick couldn't follow on his bike. Kendrick skidded to a stop, breathing hard, and watched the man disappear around a corner. He thought about chasing him on foot, but the guy had a head start and Kendrick had no idea where the alley led. Instead, he got off his bike, picked up the red bike the thief had abandoned, and stood there for a moment trying to catch his breath. He looked at the bike. It was a kid's bike, smaller than his, with a red frame and black handlebars. The boy who had been robbed was probably still back near the park, upset and scared. Kendrick decided the right thing to do was to take the bike back to him. Kendrick held on to his own blue bike with one hand and the red bike with the other, rolling both of them as he started walking back toward the park. It was awkward to manage two bikes at once, but he kept them balanced and kept moving. What Kendrick didn't know was that someone was watching him. Melissa Adams lived in a large two-story house on the corner of the street that Kendrick was walking down. She was 44 years old, had lived in Willowbrook Estates for over a decade, and considered herself one of the neighborhood's most vigilant residents. She had been vocal at homeowners association meetings about the recent bike thefts, had posted warnings on the neighborhood's Facebook group, and had told everyone she saw to keep an eye out for suspicious activity. Melissa was standing in her living room looking out the window while talking on the phone with a friend, when she saw Kendrick walking down the street holding two bikes. She stopped mid-sentence and stared. She didn't recognize Kendrick. She had never seen him before, and he was holding two bikes. Melissa's brain made an immediate calculation. Black teenager plus two bikes plus recent thefts equals thief. She didn't consider any other explanation. She didn't think about the possibility that one of the bikes might be his and the other might belong to someone else for a legitimate reason. She didn't go outside to ask him what he was doing. She just saw what she wanted to see, and what she saw confirmed her assumptions. She ended the call with her friend, pulled out her phone, and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency? Melissa's voice came out urgent and breathless. There's a black male, looks like a teenager, and he has two bikes. I think he's the one who's been stealing bikes in our neighborhood. You need to send someone right now before he gets away. The dispatcher asked, what is he doing with the bikes? He's just walking with them, holding them both. He's wearing a gray hoodie and black jeans. He's on Maple Street near the corner of Elm. Please hurry. The call was logged and dispatched to the nearest patrol unit. Officer Brian Collins, who was 3 blocks away, received the call and turned on his lights. Officer Brian Collins was 38 years old, with 9 years on the force, and he had a reputation that his supervisors had documented but never seriously addressed. Over those 9 years, Collins had been the subject of 4 formal complaints from Black and Latino residents, all of them claiming he had stopped them without cause, questioned them aggressively, and treated them like suspects based on nothing more than their appearance. All 4 complaints had been investigated and dismissed with verbal warnings. The pattern was there, written into his file, but no one had ever done anything to stop it. Collins pulled up to Maple Street, and the first thing he saw was Kendrick walking with 2 bikes. Collins got out of his cruiser, his hand moving immediately to rest on his service weapon, and his voice came out loud and commanding. Drop the bikes. Put your hands where I can see them. Now! Kendrick stopped walking and looked up at the officer, confusion crossing his face. What? What did I do wrong? Collins stepped closer, his hand still on his weapon. I said drop the bikes and put your hands up. I just got a report of a black male with 2 stolen bikes. You match the description perfectly. So I'm not going to ask again. Drop them now. Kendrick's heart started pounding. Officer, I didn't steal anything. I'm returning this bike to its owner. The real thief ran away. If you just let me explain... Collins cut him off. Nice lie. I know you're kind. I'm sure you're the thief. Kendrick felt panic rising in his chest. No, you're making a mistake. If you could just find the boy who was robbed, he'll tell you I'm telling the truth. Collins ignored him, pulled out his handcuffs, and walked toward Kendrick. You're under arrest. Kendrick took a step back. I'm not a thief. I was trying to help. By now, neighbors had started coming out of their houses. Some were recording on their phones. Others were just watching. A few were nodding like they had known all along who the bike thief was. Melissa Adams came out of her house and walked toward Officer Collins with a look of satisfaction on her face. She had been the one to call the police, and now she was here to make sure Collins knew it. Officer, don't believe anything he says, Melissa said, her voice loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. That's what his kind normally does. They lie. I don't even know him. He probably doesn't even live in this neighborhood. She pointed at the bikes. He didn't just steal 1 bike, but 2. The audacity. He should be locked up right away. Kendrick looked at her, his voice shaking with frustration and fear. I'm not a thief. One bike is mine and the other belongs to a boy who was getting robbed. I chased the thief down. I was just trying to help, and now I'm being treated like a criminal. He turned to Collins. I live just a few blocks away. My address is 1847 Oak Ridge Lane. You can verify I'm telling the truth. Please. Melissa cut in again, stepping closer to Collins. Don't listen to anything he says. All they do is lie, young or old. Collins looked at Kendrick, then at Melissa, and made his decision. He grabbed Kendrick's arm and started pulling him toward the patrol car. You're coming with me. Kendrick tried to pull away. This is a misunderstanding. I didn't do anything wrong. Collins twisted Kendrick's arms behind his back and snapped the handcuffs onto his wrists. Kendrick stood there in the middle of the street, handcuffed, humiliated, and terrified, while Melissa Adams stood nearby looking proud of herself, and neighbors recorded the entire scene on their phones. And then, from down the street, came the sound of a young voice shouting, "Wait, stop, let him go." The young white boy whose bike had been stolen came running down the street, his face red and streaked with tears, his breath coming in short gasps from running as fast as he could. He had been searching for his bike, hoping the man who stole it had dropped it somewhere nearby. And when he saw the crowd of people gathered around a police car, he had run toward it, thinking maybe someone had found his bike. But what he saw when he got closer made him stop for just a second, in confusion, and then start running even faster. His bike was there, leaning against the curb, and the teenager who had chased down the thief and saved his bike was standing in handcuffs with a police officer holding his arm. The boy ran straight toward Officer Brian Collins, shouting as loud as he could, "Wait, let him go. He's telling the truth. That bike is mine." Collins turned to look at the boy, his grip on Kendrick still firm. The boy was breathing hard, pointing at the red bike on the ground and then at Kendrick. "A man stole my bike from me near the park, and this guy," the boy pointed directly at Kendrick, "chased him down and got it back for me. He saved my bike. Why is he the one getting arrested?" The neighbors who had been recording stopped moving. Some lowered their phones. Others exchanged glances. Melissa Adams, who had been standing near Collins, looking satisfied with herself, felt her face go hot. Collins looked at the boy, then at Kendrick, then back at the boy. "Are you sure about this, kid?" The boy nodded so hard his whole body moved. "Yes, I saw the whole thing. A man in all black took my bike. I tried to stop him, but he was too strong. And then this guy chased him on his own bike and made him drop mine. He was bringing it back to me." Melissa stepped forward, her voice getting defensive. "Are you absolutely sure, kid? Are you sure he's not the thief? Maybe you're confused." The boy turned to look at her, and his face twisted with anger. Tears were still running down his cheeks, but his voice came out strong and clear. "I'm not confused. He helped me. He didn't steal anything. And you're trying to get him arrested for helping." The boy looked back at Collins, and his voice broke as he started crying again. "Please let him go. He didn't do anything wrong. He was just trying to help me." Collins stood there for a long moment, looking at the boy, at Kendrick, at the two bikes, and at the crowd of neighbors who were now staring at him with expressions that ranged from uncomfortable to openly critical. He could feel the weight of the situation shifting, and he knew that with this many witnesses and this many phones recording, he couldn't just ignore what the boy was saying. Collins pulled out his keys and unlocked the handcuffs. Kendrick brought his arms forward and rubbed his wrists where the metal had dug into his skin. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, still processing the fact that he had been handcuffed and accused of being a thief for trying to do the right thing. The boy walked over to Kendrick, still crying, and his voice came out small and apologetic. "I'm sorry they did this to you. Thank you for getting my bike back. You didn't have to chase him, but you did. Thank you." Kendrick looked down at the boy and managed a small nod. "It's okay. I'm glad you got your bike back." Melissa Adams tried to say something, tried to defend herself, but one of the neighbors cut her off. "You called the cops on him for helping a kid. What's wrong with you?" Another neighbor added, "He was returning a stolen bike and you assumed he was the thief. That's messed up, Melissa." Melissa's face was bright red now, and she didn't have an answer that would make this situation any better. She turned and walked quickly back toward her house without saying another word, leaving Collins standing there with Kendrick and the boy and a crowd of neighbors who had recorded everything. Collins cleared his throat and looked at Kendrick. "You're free to go." No apology. No acknowledgement that he had been wrong. Just, "You're free to go," like Kendrick had been detained for a minor inconvenience instead of being handcuffed and publicly humiliated based on nothing but his skin color. Kendrick picked up his blue bike, without saying anything to Collins. He looked at the boy one more time. "Be careful with your bike, and if you see that guy again, don't try to stop him. Just call the police." The boy nodded, wiping his eyes. Kendrick got on his bike and rode away, and Collins got back into his patrol car and drove off without another word to anyone. But the neighbors stayed, and the videos they had recorded started uploading to social media within minutes. By that evening, the video of Kendrick being handcuffed for returning a stolen bike had been viewed over 2 million times. Kendrick Briggs rode his bike home in silence, his wrists still aching from the handcuffs and his mind replaying the moment when Officer Brian Collins had grabbed him and Melissa Adams had stood there calling him a liar in front of everyone. When he walked through the front door of his house, his mother Lisa was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and the moment she saw his face, she knew something had happened. "Kendrick, what's wrong?" Kendrick set his bike against the wall and sat down at the kitchen table. He told her everything. The robbery he witnessed, the chase, recovering the bike, being stopped by the police, being handcuffed, Melissa Adams calling him a thief and telling the officer not to believe anything he said because that's what his kind does. And finally, the boy showing up and proving Kendrick had been telling the truth the entire time. Lisa listened without interrupting, and with every sentence Kendrick spoke, her expression got harder. She was an attorney who had spent her career fighting civil rights cases, and she had heard stories like this dozens of times from other families. But hearing it from her own son, seeing the hurt and humiliation on his face, made it personal in a way that nothing else ever had. When Kendrick finished talking, Lisa pulled out her phone. "Show me the videos." Kendrick opened social media on his phone and found the videos that neighbors had already posted. There were 5 different angles of the incident. One showed Officer Collins approaching Kendrick with his hand on his weapon. Another captured the moment Collins handcuffed him. A third had clear audio of Melissa Adams saying that's what his kind normally does, they lie, and insisting that Kendrick should be locked up immediately. Lisa watched all of them twice, then she made a phone call. The person on the other end answered after 2 rings. "Marcus Reed." "Marcus, it's Lisa Thompson. I need your help. My son was racially profiled, falsely accused, and arrested today by a woman in our neighborhood and a police officer. I have video evidence, multiple angles. I want to file a lawsuit, a big one." Marcus Reed was one of the best civil rights attorneys in the state, and he had worked with Lisa on cases before. He listened as Lisa described what had happened, asked her to send him the videos, and told her he would review everything and call her back within the hour. 50 minutes later, Marcus called back. "I've watched the videos. I've reviewed similar cases. This is textbook racial profiling and false reporting. The woman, Melissa Adams, made a 911 call reporting your son as a thief based solely on his race and the fact that he was holding 2 bikes. She never attempted to verify what was happening. She never asked questions. She just assumed guilt. And the officer arrested Kendrick without conducting any investigation or asking for the victim's account." Marcus paused. "Lisa, this is a strong case. We can file against Melissa Adams for false reporting, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and racial discrimination. We're going to seek $1 million in damages." Lisa didn't hesitate. "Do it." The lawsuit was filed 3 days later, and the moment the paperwork was submitted, the media picked up the story. Local news stations ran segments showing the videos of Kendrick being handcuffed. National outlets picked it up within 24 hours. The headlines were clear and damning. "Black teen arrested for returning stolen bike. Woman calls police on teenager who stopped bike thief. Video shows teen handcuffed after saving boy's bike." Melissa Adams became the face of racial profiling overnight. Her name was shared across social media, her address was posted online, and her phone started ringing constantly with reporters asking for comment. She refused to speak publicly, but that didn't stop the story from spreading. The police department opened an internal investigation into Officer Brian Collins, and what they found made the situation significantly worse. Collins had been with the department for 9 years, and during that time he had been the subject of 4 formal complaints from Black and Latino residents. All 4 complaints described the same behavior Kendrick had experienced: stops without cause, aggressive questioning, and treatment as a suspect based solely on appearance. All 4 complaints had been filed, reviewed, and dismissed with verbal warnings. The pattern had been documented for years, but no one had ever taken action to address it. The investigation also revealed that Collins had made 47 stops over the past 2 years that resulted in no citations, no arrests, and no enforcement action. Of those 47 stops, 41 involved people of color. The data showed a clear and undeniable pattern of racial profiling that the department had allowed to continue without intervention. 2 weeks after the lawsuit was filed, Officer Brian Collins was placed on administrative leave. 3 weeks after that, he was terminated. The official findings stated that he had violated department policies on constitutional policing, demonstrated a documented pattern of racially biased stops, and failed to conduct a proper investigation before making an arrest. He was 38 years old with 9 years of law enforcement experience, and his career was over. Melissa Adams tried to defend herself in a brief statement released through an attorney, claiming she had been trying to keep the neighborhood safe and that she didn't know Kendrick had been helping. But the videos made it clear that she hadn't tried to know. She had seen a black teenager with bikes and had immediately called the police without asking a single question. Her defense didn't help. Her employer, a financial consulting firm, terminated her employment after determining that her actions reflected poorly on the company's values. Neighbors who had once been friendly with her began avoiding her. The homeowners association received multiple complaints about her, and she eventually stopped attending meetings. The actual bike thief, the white man in black clothing who had started the entire incident, was identified 4 weeks later through security camera footage from homes in the neighborhood. His name was revealed, and he was arrested and charged with multiple counts of theft. He had been responsible for all 7 bike thefts in Willowbrook Estates. Kendrick had been right all along, and the person Melissa Adams should have been worried about had nothing to do with the teenager she had falsely reported. The case moved forward, and Kendrick's story became a national example of how quickly racial bias could turn a good deed into a criminal accusation. The lawsuit against Melissa Adams went to trial 8 months after the incident, and the courtroom was packed with reporters, community members, and legal observers who recognized the case as a landmark example of the consequences of false reporting based on racial bias. Melissa's attorneys tried to argue that she had been acting in good faith as a concerned neighbor, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The videos showed her coming outside not to ask questions but to receive praise for calling the police. The 911 call recording revealed that she had reported Kendrick as a thief without any evidence beyond the fact that he was black and holding 2 bikes. And witness testimony from neighbors confirmed that Melissa had a history of viewing black people in the neighborhood with suspicion. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a verdict in Kendrick's favor. The judgment awarded him $1 million in damages for false reporting, defamation, racial discrimination, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Melissa Adams was ordered to pay the full amount, and the financial burden destroyed her. She was forced to sell her house in Willowbrook Estates and move to a different state to escape the public attention. Her name remained permanently attached to the case as it was used in civil rights training programs and discussions about the harm caused by racially motivated 911 calls. Officer Brian Collins never worked in law enforcement again. After his termination, he applied to other police departments in neighboring counties, but every background check revealed the reason for his firing and the pattern of complaints that had been ignored for years. No agency would hire him. He eventually found work in private security, but even that didn't last long once his new employer discovered the viral videos and the national coverage of his role in Kendrick's false arrest. He became a cautionary tale in police training academies, where his case was used to demonstrate how racial bias and a failure to investigate can destroy careers and expose departments to legal liability. The Charlotte Police Department, where Collins had worked, implemented sweeping reforms in the aftermath of the lawsuit. All officers were required to complete mandatory training on implicit bias and constitutional policing. New protocols were established requiring officers to conduct basic investigations and verify victim accounts before making arrests in cases reported by third parties. An independent oversight board was created to review complaints of racial profiling, and officers with patterns of stops that resulted in no enforcement action were flagged for additional scrutiny. The reforms were credited with reducing racially disparate stops by 68% over the following 3 years. Kendrick Briggs used the settlement to pay for his college education and enrolled in a criminal justice program with the goal of becoming a civil rights attorney like his mother. He became a vocal advocate for reforming 911 policies to hold false reporters accountable and worked with community organizations to educate people about the dangers of making assumptions based on race. He gave interviews about his experience and used his story to encourage others to intervene when they witnessed injustice, rather than staying silent. Lisa Thompson, Kendrick's mother, continued her work as a civil rights attorney and took on additional cases involving false reporting and racial profiling. She used Kendrick's case as an example in her practice, showing other victims that accountability was possible and that racist behavior had consequences. 5 years after the incident, Kendrick graduated from college with honors and was accepted into law school. Melissa Adams was still living out of state, her reputation destroyed and her finances in ruins. Officer Brian Collins was working night shifts at a warehouse. The reforms implemented by the police department remained in place, and complaints of racial profiling had decreased significantly. The case became a permanent reference point in discussions about racial bias in policing and the responsibility of civilians who make false reports. The videos were shown in classrooms, training sessions, and community forums as evidence of how quickly assumptions based on race can escalate into false arrests and civil rights violations. The lesson was expensive, public, and permanent. Helping someone while black should never result in arrest. Calling the police based on racial bias rather than evidence has consequences. And departments that ignore patterns of discrimination will pay the price in lawsuits, reforms, and loss of public trust. Kendrick never received an apology from Melissa Adams or Brian Collins, but he received something far more important. Justice, accountability, and the knowledge that his willingness to fight back had created changes that would protect others from experiencing what he had endured. If you believe a teenager returning a stolen bike shouldn't be arrested based on the color of his skin, share this story. What consequences do you think should exist for people who make false 911 calls based on racial bias? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this reminded you that doing the right thing while black shouldn't be treated as a crime, subscribe. We're not stopping until every person can help their neighbor without being handcuffed for it.